It was a peaceful day on the Xarth homeworld, a planet known for its beauty and advanced technology. The Xarth, a peaceful and intelligent species, had lived for centuries without conflict. Their cities were tall, elegant, and full of life. The Xarth were not warriors. They were artists, thinkers, and scientists. They lived in harmony with nature, using their technology to improve life for all. Their world was a place of peace, and they cherished it deeply. But that peace was shattered one fateful day. The Hrakka arrived. The Hrakka were a terrifying race. Their bodies were covered in thick, armored exoskeletons, making them almost unstoppable in battle. They were brutal, ruthless, and cold-hearted. When the Hrakka invaded, they brought only death and destruction. Their massive ships entered the Xarth system without warning, raining down fiery destruction on the cities below. The Xarth had no chance. At first, the Xarth tried to defend themselves. Their advanced technology was far beyond most other civilizations, but it was no match for the Hrakka's overwhelming firepower. The invaders tore through Xarth defenses as if they were paper. The Xarth were helpless. In the capital city, a small group of Xarth leaders gathered in a hidden command center. Their faces were pale with fear. They had been in contact with other races before. Diplomatic relations were their strength. But this was different. The Hrakka didn't want to negotiate. They wanted to wipe out the Xarth. The leaders knew that if they didn't act fast, their entire species could be wiped from existence. Desperation filled the room. The Xarth needed help, but who would answer their call? They had never needed to ask for help before. The universe was full of dangerous species, but none had ever attacked them. The Xarth had always been the peacemakers, the ones who settled disputes, who helped others. But now, they were the ones in need. One of the leaders, a wise and elderly Xarth named Telarath, made a decision. He activated the ancient communication system, a device that could send messages across the entire galaxy. It was a last resort, a cry for help. Telarath knew that whoever received the message might not be able to help, but he had no other choice. The message was simple, but powerful. To any who hear this, the Xarth are under attack. Our world is being destroyed. We beg for your aid. We are a peaceful people. We have no army, no defenses. Only your strength can save us. The message was sent out, a beacon of hope in the darkness. The Xarth leaders could only wait, praying that someone would hear their plea and come to their aid before it was too late. And so, the cry for help echoed through the galaxy, reaching distant stars, unknown civilizations, and, unknowingly, the ears of Earth's greatest warriors, the Deathworlders. The Xarth's message had traveled far, bouncing off stars and planets, reaching places no one expected. One of those places was Earth. On Earth, life was harsh. It was a planet filled with danger, raging storms, dangerous creatures, and wild, unforgiving landscapes. The people who lived on Earth had survived this harsh world for thousands of years. They were strong, tough, and determined. Earth's people, called Deathworlders by others, were known for their ability to endure the impossible. They had learned to adapt to their dangerous environment, becoming some of the most resilient and fierce beings in the galaxy. When the Xarth's message reached Earth, it didn't go unnoticed. The message was picked up by Earth's military systems, which were constantly monitoring space for any signs of danger. At first, the scientists thought it was a hoax or some kind of strange interference. But after examining the signal more closely, they realized it was real. The Xarth were in trouble. The message was clear. They needed help. The Earth government immediately called a meeting with top military officials, scientists, and strategists. The leaders of Earth were used to challenges. They had faced wars, natural disasters, and threats from other species. But this was different. The Xarth were peaceful beings, not warriors. They had no army to fight back. And the Hrakka, the invaders, were known to be terrifying and brutal. The leaders of Earth had to make a decision. Should they help the Xarth, Or was it too dangerous to get involved? The answer was simple. Earth's leaders knew that they could not ignore the call for help. The Deathworlders had faced worse dangers and survived. If anyone could fight the Rakka, it was them. They had the strength, the courage, and the skills to defeat any threat. But the question remained, could they defeat an enemy as powerful as the Rakka? General Marcus Vallon, one of Earth's most respected military leaders, stood at the front of the meeting room. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and a deep voice that commanded attention. He had been through countless battles, but the idea of fighting the Rakka made even him uneasy. "We can't turn our backs on them," General Vallon said, his voice steady but firm. "The Xarth are not asking for mercy. They are asking for survival. We owe it to them to help." The room was silent for a moment. The officials exchanged glances, understanding the weight of the decision. After what felt like an eternity, the President of Earth stood up. "We will send a force, a team of our best soldiers. We will not let the Xarth fall." And so the decision was made. Earth would send a task force to the Xarth homeworld. The team would be made up of Earth's elite soldiers, Deathworlders who had faced dangers beyond imagination. They would travel to the Xarth planet, and they would bring the fight to the Rakka. The humans knew that this would not be easy. The Rakka were a fierce enemy, and the Xarth were not warriors. But the Deathworlders had one thing that the Xarth did not, an unbreakable will to survive. And they would stop at nothing to protect those who had called for help. The mission to save the Xarth was about to begin. As Earth's decision to help the Xarth was made, a secret war council was formed. The most powerful military minds on Earth gathered to prepare for what could be one of the most dangerous missions in history. General Marcus Vallon, who had been the first to speak in favor of the mission, stood at the head of the council. His expression was focused, but deep down, he knew that this mission would not be easy. The room was filled with the brightest and toughest military leaders Earth had. Each person had faced countless battles, but none of them had ever faced an enemy as brutal as the Rakka. There was a sense of nervous tension in the air, but it was mixed with determination. The Deathworlders were not easily intimidated, but the stories of the Rakka's destruction had already begun to spread. The fear was real, but so was the resolve to protect the innocent. General Vallon looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his fellow officers. "We are not going to send just any team. We need the best, the toughest soldiers we have. We need warriors who can survive anything." One by one, the other officers nodded. Among them was Lieutenant Sarah Cade, a veteran of many battles who had led Earth's most elite special forces. She was small but incredibly fast and deadly in combat. Her reputation had spread far and wide, and she was known for completing missions that seemed impossible. "We'll need everything," Lieutenant Cade said, her voice calm but serious. "The best weapons, the most advanced tech, and our finest soldiers. We cannot take the risk of failure." Another officer, Commander Jake Voss, was an expert in tactics and strategy. He was a master of using the environment to his advantage. "We can't just rely on brute force," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We need a plan. The Rakka will be expecting us to attack head-on. We'll need to hit them from all angles, confuse them, and take out their leaders. We break their will to fight." Vallon listened carefully. The plan was coming together, but he knew that even the best plans didn't always work. The Rakka were ruthless and cunning. They would not go down easily. Still, Earth's Deathworlders had a secret weapon the Rakka could not anticipate: their ability to adapt. The Deathworlders had survived against the odds on their dangerous planet, and they knew how to think on their feet, how to adjust their strategies when needed. As the council discussed the final details, a holographic map of the Xarth homeworld appeared in the center of the room. The Xarth planet was beautiful, but it was in chaos. The Rakka had already taken control of many cities, and the survivors were hiding in underground bunkers. The Deathworlders would have to act quickly. General Vallon turned to his team, his voice low but firm. We are not just fighting for the Xarth. We are fighting for the future of the galaxy. If the Krakka succeed here, they will not stop. We have to win. We must win. Everyone in the room nodded. There was no turning back now. The mission had been set into motion, and Earth's finest warriors were ready. They would not fail. Not while there was breath in their lungs. The Deathworlders would fight, and they would win. The journey to Xarth was long, but the team was ready. Earth's elite soldiers, the Deathworlders, had trained for months. They were prepared for anything the Krakka could throw at them, but nothing could have truly prepared them for the devastation they saw when they landed on Xarth. As their ships descended through the alien atmosphere, the team saw the once beautiful Xarth cities in ruins. Towering skyscrapers, once shining with light and energy, were now crumbling. Smoke billowed into the sky from broken buildings, and the ground was scarred with blast marks from the Krakka's weapons. The planet's surface looked like a war zone, and it was clear that the Xarth had lost their battle. The Deathworlders had arrived too late to stop the initial wave of destruction. General Valen stood at the front of the landing craft, staring out at the planet below. His eyes were hard, but inside, a knot of anger began to form. The Xarth had been a peaceful species, and now their world was dying. The Krakka had no honor, no mercy. They were monsters, and the Deathworlders would make sure they paid for every life they had taken. When the ships touched down, the soldiers quickly disembarked. The air was thick with smoke, and the temperature was unbearably hot. The Xarth cities, once known for their harmony with nature, now looked like something from a nightmare. The Deathworlders immediately went to work, setting up defensive positions and securing the area. Their mission was clear: protect the Xarth survivors and push back the Krakka. Lieutenant Cade moved through the ruins with her team, her eyes scanning every corner for signs of danger. The streets were eerily quiet, and it didn't take long for them to find the first group of Xarth refugees, scattered, hiding in makeshift shelters deep within the city's wreckage. They were afraid, weak, and scared. The Deathworlders approached them carefully, speaking in calm voices. They had seen fear before, but never this kind of fear. This was the fear of a species on the brink of extinction. One of the Xarth leaders, a tall figure named Telarath, stepped forward, his eyes filled with both gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," he said in a soft voice, struggling to find the right words. "You are our last hope." General Valen nodded. "We're here to help. We'll take the fight to the Krakka, and we'll make sure no one else has to die." Telarath looked uncertain but hopeful. "You have the strength of the Deathworlders. But the Krakka are not like anything you fought before. They are merciless. They will not stop until we are all dead." The general's face tightened. "Then we will make sure they know that the Deathworlders never back down." The team moved forward, deeper into the heart of the city. As they went, they saw more and more evidence of the Krakka's brutality. But there was something else, too, a flicker of hope. The Xarth may have lost their fight, but they were not finished yet. Not as long as the Deathworlders were here. The battle for Xarth was about to begin. The Deathworlders had only been on Xarth for a few hours, but already they could feel the tension in the air. The soldiers had set up their positions around the city ruins, ready for anything. They had secured the Xarth survivors and were working with them to prepare for the next steps. But the soldiers knew this was just the calm before the storm. The Krakka were still out there, and the fight was far from over. Lieutenant Cade paced back and forth, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her team was ready, and the general had given clear orders: find the Krakka and hit them hard. They would not be allowed to take another step forward on this planet. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the air. It wasn't the wind or the weather. It was the unmistakable sound of heavy boots marching, followed by the roar of battle machines. The Krakka were coming. Cade's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her cool. The soldiers had been trained for moments like this. They had faced down enemies that were stronger, faster, and more dangerous. They would not be caught off guard. "Everyone, get into position," Kate ordered, her voice sharp. "We've got company." The soldiers quickly scattered, moving to the best defensive spots. They knew how to fight in this kind of terrain, through the ruins of a city, where every corner was a potential ambush. The Deathworlders weren't just warriors. They were survivors. They had fought through everything Earth could throw at them. And now they would do the same for the Xarth. As the first wave of Krakka troops appeared, the Deathworlders could see just how monstrous they truly were. The Krakka were massive, towering creatures with thick, armored exoskeletons. Their eyes glowed with a fierce red light, and their weapons looked like nothing the humans had ever seen. They moved with terrifying speed and strength, and the ground beneath them seemed to shake with every step. Cade's team didn't hesitate. The Deathworlders opened fire with their high-powered rifles, the bullets tearing through the Krakka armor. The first few Krakka soldiers fell, but they didn't stay down for long. Their bodies seemed to repair themselves quickly, and more soldiers rushed in to take their place. "These things are tougher than we thought," Cade muttered under her breath. But she didn't back down. "Keep firing." General Valen's voice came over the comms. "Don't give them an inch. Hold your ground." The battle was brutal, with the Deathworlders using their guerrilla tactics to take down as many Krakka as possible. But the enemy kept coming, wave after wave, each one more relentless than the last. The Krakka didn't retreat. They didn't show mercy. They fought to destroy. As the fighting intensified, a massive Krakka war machine appeared on the horizon, rumbling forward like a moving fortress. The Deathworlders knew they had to stop it, or it would wipe out everything in its path. "We need to take that thing down now," Cade shouted. "Everyone, focus fire on the war machine." With precise coordination, the Deathworlders fired everything they had at the massive vehicle. Explosions rocked the ground, and the war machine finally began to falter, smoke pouring from its joints. But the battle was far from over. The Krakka had made their presence known, and the Deathworlders now understood the true scale of the enemy they were facing. The Xarth had called for help, and the Deathworlders had delivered. But the real fight was just beginning. The battle for Xarth had only just begun, but already the Deathworlders could feel the weight of the fight pressing down on them. The Krakka were relentless, and the soldiers' energy was starting to run low. The ground around them was littered with wreckage, burnt vehicles, broken buildings, and the bodies of both fallen Krakka and Xarth. It was a war of attrition, and every inch of ground was hard-won. But despite the pressure, the Deathworlders refused to give up. They had come to Xarth to protect the innocent, and they would not fail. General Valen had ordered the team to regroup and reinforce their position at the heart of the city. It was the best place to hold off the Krakka and keep the Xarth survivors safe. "Keep your heads on a swivel," Lieutenant Cade said, her voice sharp as ever. "The Krakka are smart. They'll try to flank us. Stay alert." Her team nodded and continued moving through the ruins, scanning the area for any signs of movement. They knew the enemy was out there, but the smoke and dust made it hard to see anything beyond a few feet. The sounds of battle, shouting, explosions, and gunfire filled the air. As the team moved deeper into the city, Cade's heart skipped a beat. She spotted something in the distance, an enormous figure moving toward them through the smoke. It was the Krakka war machine, the one that had nearly torn them apart earlier. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were dozens of smaller Krakka soldiers surrounding it, forming a protective ring. "We need to take that thing down," Cade said urgently. "It's the key to their forces." General Valen's voice came over the comms. "Agreed. I'm sending reinforcements to your position. Hold out until they arrive." The Deathworlders gathered their strength. They had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was different. The Krakka were bigger, stronger, and better armed. Still, the soldiers knew that the longer they held their ground, the more likely they were to win. They just had to hold on a little longer. "On my mark," Cade said, her finger tightening on the trigger of her rifle. 3, 2, 1, now. The team opened fire, hitting the Brakka war machine with everything they had. Explosions rocked the ground as their bullets struck the enemy's weak points, its joints, its armor, and its weapons. The war machine faltered, its massive form trembling under the attack. But the Brakka soldiers were closing in fast, and the Deathworlders couldn't keep the pressure on for long. Cade's team was doing their best, but they needed help. Just then, the sound of incoming dropships filled the air. The reinforcements had arrived. "Stay strong," General Valen shouted over the comms. "We're here." The fresh troops landed in a burst of dust, immediately joining the fight. The tide of battle shifted as the Deathworlders' numbers increased. The reinforcements pushed the Brakka back, gaining ground inch by inch. The war machine finally staggered and collapsed, its systems overloaded by the relentless fire. With the war machine down, the Deathworlders pressed forward, their energy renewed by the arrival of more soldiers. The Brakka, realizing they had lost their advantage, began to fall back. But the Deathworlders wouldn't let them escape. "We have them on the run," Cade said, a fierce smile on her face. "Now, let's finish this." The Deathworlders pushed forward with even more determination, driving the Brakka out of the city. It wasn't a complete victory yet, but they were winning. Sarth was still standing, and they weren't going to let the Brakka take it. The Deathworlders had made progress, but the war was far from over. The Brakka had been pushed back from the city center, but they were still a powerful force, and their numbers seemed endless. General Valen and his team knew that the next phase of the battle would be their most dangerous yet. The survivors of the Xarth were now safe in hidden bunkers, but the Brakka would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. Their war machines were still active, and their soldiers were regrouping for another attack. The Deathworlders had to make their move quickly. "We've pushed them back for now, but they'll be back soon," General Valen said, his voice firm as he addressed the team. "We can't afford to wait. We need to hit them hard before they regroup." Lieutenant Cade nodded. "Agreed. But we need to be smart about it. If we go in without a plan, we'll be outnumbered again." Cade turned to her team. They had fought together for years, and they knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. They were a family, and each of them trusted the others with their lives. This battle wasn't just about strategy, it was about survival. "All right," Cade said, pulling up a map of the Brakka positions. "Here's what we're going to do. We hit them where they least expect it, at the heart of their base. We'll move in fast, take out their command center, and cripple their ability to coordinate." General Valen gave a grim nod. "We'll have no backup once we're in there. This has to be a one-shot deal." The plan was set. The Deathworlders would infiltrate the Brakka stronghold and destroy their command center, cutting off their ability to regroup. It was risky, but it was their best shot. The soldiers moved out under the cover of night, using the darkness as their ally. Their goal was clear: destroy the Brakka's leadership and bring an end to the war. As they approached the enemy base, the air was thick with tension. The city was eerily silent, and the only sound was the soft crunch of boots on the broken ground. The Deathworlders knew that one wrong move could turn the tide against them. They had to be quick, silent, and deadly. Lieutenant Cade led the charge, her team close behind her. They moved through the shadows, avoiding patrols and keeping their weapons ready. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. When they reached the heart of the Brakka stronghold, the battle began. The Deathworlders stormed the command center, blasting their way through the enemy's defenses. The Brakka fought back fiercely, but the Deathworlders were relentless. They moved like a well-oiled machine, taking out Brakka soldiers one by one. But the Brakka weren't done yet. As the Deathworlders neared the command center, a huge Brakka warlord appeared, towering over them. This was the leader of the Brakka forces, a monster of a creature, its armor glowing with power. The Deathworlders knew this was the final test. They couldn't afford to fail now. With a loud battle cry, they charged at the warlord, determined to finish the fight once and for all. The Hrakka warlord stood in front of the Deathworlders, towering over them like a mountain. Its massive armor glowed with a dark energy, and its red eyes burned with fury. It was the ultimate enemy, and the Deathworlders knew that defeating it would mean ending the war. But they also knew that this fight would test every ounce of their strength and skill. Lieutenant Cade stepped forward, her weapon raised. "We take it down together," she said, her voice steady despite the danger. "Everyone, focus your fire on its weak points. We can't let it get close." The Deathworlders spread out, taking positions around the warlord. They knew that it had powerful weapons, but they also knew that no armor was invincible. Every enemy had a weakness, and the Deathworlders would find it. The warlord roared, a deafening sound that shook the ground beneath them. It charged forward, its massive fists swinging in wide arcs. The Deathworlders scattered, dodging the blows as they fired at the creature's exposed joints. But the warlord's armor was tough, and the bullets barely seemed to penetrate. It was like fighting a living tank. Cade's eyes narrowed. They needed something more, something powerful enough to break through the warlord's defenses. She scanned the battlefield, searching for anything that could give them an edge. Then she spotted it, an energy core, glowing brightly on the warlord's back. It was the key to its power, and if they could destroy it, they could end the fight. "Focus fire on its back," Cade shouted. "Aim for the energy core." The Deathworlders responded instantly, their weapons adjusting as they aimed for the core. The warlord turned to face them, its massive claws slashing through the air. But it was too late. The Deathworlders' shots hit the mark, and the core erupted in a blinding explosion of energy. The warlord howled in pain, staggering back as its systems began to overload. But it wasn't done yet. With a final, desperate roar, it lunged at Cade, its claws aimed straight for her. She barely had time to react, diving out of the way as the warlord's claws sliced through the air, where she had been standing just seconds before. Cade rolled to her feet, heart racing. She had to finish this. With a cry, she charged forward, using all her speed and strength to close the distance. Her weapon was ready, and as she reached the warlord's exposed side, she fired directly into its unprotected circuits. The warlord's body convulsed, and then, with a final burst of energy, it collapsed to the ground. The Deathworlders watched as the creature fell, its massive form crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust and debris. The battle was over. For a moment, there was silence. The Deathworlders stood, catching their breath, their eyes scanning the battlefield for any signs of danger. But the Hrakka were retreating. With their warlord fallen, their morale shattered, the remaining Hrakka soldiers began to flee. General Valen's voice crackled over the comms. "Well done, team. The planet is ours. The war is over." The Deathworlders didn't celebrate. Not yet. There were still wounded to tend to, still survivors to protect. But as they looked around at the fallen Hrakka, they knew that they had won. They had delivered vengeance for the Xarth, and the galaxy would remember what happened on this day. When the Hrakka came to destroy, the Deathworlders fought back, and they won. The dust from the final battle had barely settled, but the Deathworlders stood victorious. The Hrakka had been defeated, their warlord fallen, and the rest of their forces scattered in retreat. It was a hard-fought victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Deathworlders had kept their promise to the Xarth. As the soldiers surveyed the battlefield, the weight of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The city of Xarth, though scared and damaged, was still standing. The Xarth survivors, hiding in their bunkers, slowly began to emerge, cautiously looking at the warriors who had saved them. Lieutenant Cade stood at the front of her team, watching the Xarth approach. They were a peaceful species, their bodies slim and graceful, their faces marked with both fear and hope. Some of them had tears in their eyes, but others stood tall, a new strength in their posture. General Valen approached Cade, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We did it," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Xarth is safe." Cade nodded, but there was a seriousness to her expression. "It's over. But it's not the end for them. They've lost so much, and they'll need time to rebuild." Valen looked over at the survivors. "They'll rebuild with our help. We'll make sure they're not alone." The Xarth leader, Telrath, walked forward, his head bowed in gratitude. He had seen the Deathworlders fight with a ferocity and determination that his people had never known. He had heard the legends of the Deathworlders, their strength, their courage, and their unyielding will. Now he had seen it firsthand. "Thank you," Telrath said, his voice deep and full of emotion. "You saved us. You gave us hope when all seemed lost." General Valen placed a hand on Telrath's shoulder. "It was our honor. But this isn't just our victory. It's yours too. You fought to survive. And that's what matters." Cade stepped forward. "We'll help you rebuild. It's the least we can do. But we'll also make sure the crack can never come back. We'll patrol, protect, and stand with you until your world is whole again." Telrath looked up, a small spark of hope returning to his eyes. "We will not forget what you've done for us. We will be forever grateful." As the sun began to rise over the ruins of the city, the Deathworlders and the Xarth stood together. The scars of the war were still fresh, but the future was bright. The Deathworlders had delivered vengeance, but they had also delivered something else, the chance for a new beginning. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. The Xarth had a long road ahead, but with the Deathworlders at their side, they would walk it with strength. The galaxy had seen what the Deathworlders could do, and now the Xarth knew that they would never be alone again. The Deathworlders had fought for the Xarth's survival, and now they would fight for their future. The galaxy had been changed forever.